Good afternoon, everybody that is joining us online. I want to just take a brief second. We're about 4 minutes before the meeting starts, but I did see the chat and everyone was wondering if the meeting had started. So we're about 4 minutes out. I do want to make sure that everybody can hear us okay. I know the panelist that I have showing is Yvette. Yvette, do you want to do a quick sound check? I see you on mute, Yvette.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute it. There it goes. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly. Thank you. We can see you perfectly.
Thank you.
Yep, me too. Color online.
Hi, Eric. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Perfect. You're coming in loud and clear as well.
Break in with questions or wait till you kind of finish your presentation and then have the questions at the end. Clerk, are you showing 5? Okay. Oh, the clock's right now. It was a couple minutes slow earlier last month. It's fixed. Okay. It's on track now. Oh, yeah. Big clock. Is it heavy? The clock striking 5. Hear the chimes. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Selma City Council Special Meeting, February 9th, 2022. It's 5 p.m. in the Selma City Council chambers. If you'd like to join through teleconferencing, that phone number is 1-301-715-8592. The webinar ID is 821-3377-5578. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro. Here. Councilmember Trujillo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho.
Here.
Mayor Robertson.
Here, oral communications. At this time, any member of the public may address the city council regarding any item on this special meeting agenda over which the council has jurisdiction. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the city manager for review. Members of the public are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Does anyone have any remarks at this point? We have anyone on the phone or on Zoom who would like to make a comment?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay. Can you identify yourself, ma'am?
Yes, I am Yvette Quiroga with the Department of Public Works and Planning with Fresno County. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk to the council.
You're breaking up just a bit, Becky. Just hold on just a sec.
It was perfect. It was perfect at the introduction. Okay, let's try it again.
Okay, well, hopefully I don't get cut off. And I'll try not to talk so fast too. I just wanted to comment really quick during your open comment. I won't have the opportunity to stay for the whole time, but I wanted to comment on what the city council is doing and give you some information that the county has been doing with staff. So I just wanted to say we're very excited about the discussion you're having today about the city being proactive and preparing for the expected growth in the future. And the county is here to support you in any way possible. And we wanted to encourage you to continue to look at the many options that you're discussing today regarding developer impact fees, other ways to stimulate development and growth. And I'm working closely with your staff, and we'd be happy to come and speak to you in the future. And before we've been busy once a year, talk about the housing programs and the funds, the CBG funds that the city gets with the county. And that is why we are here today. That's why I'm here to talk about that and just encourage you to explore different options and ways that you can utilize and bring in more resources to help build additional housing that is much needed in your community. I'm excited to see your agenda you have working with developers closely and identifying ways with the land donations and other ways to expedite housing and how you can leverage local resources to help them compete at the state level. And also wanted to have the county is also exploring methods and utilizing the home funds to work with developers who are not receiving public funds to make some units available as affordable housing to help you with that. So just wanted to say, as a county, we are here as a resource working with staff and to work in the future. And if you would like to have a workshop in the future or invite me to participate, we'd be more than happy to do so.
Thank you, Becky. Unfortunately, Yvette, sorry, Yvette. A lot of that was lost in translation, but I think we get the picture that the county would like to assist the city in any way it can, and you're excited about these pre-planning steps to more expansion and more development for the city. So thank you very much for zooming in. Are you going to stay for the rest of the meeting, or do you have to leave?
Technically, I'm on vacation and I have at 5 tried to change. So I'm going to stay on a little while. And if there's any questions, but I'm going to try and sneak out to go have dinner.
Sounds good, Yvette. I can't think of a better way of spending your vacation than attending a Selma City Council special meeting. Good job.
Yeah, well, I can't help it. My cities are so important to us, and I'm excited that you're really doing this important work. The pre-planning and laying out the foundation now and being proactive instead of reactive is going to save you guys a lot of headaches. And it also allows you opportunities, as I was saying, to leverage the money or use it in the best possible way where you get the biggest bang for your buck.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, are there any other oral communications at this time? If not, we will move on to our items of regular business. This will be a discussion and consideration of recommended actions regarding Selma infrastructure funding to support both residential and commercial development, including but not limited to all the bullet points A through I. City Manager, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council, good evening, and members of the public. Thank you for being here for this very exciting and important meeting, and I appreciate everyone's participation and interest in the items that the City Council is going to be taking up tonight. We received direction in previous meetings as staff to develop a plan for our ARPA money, which is American Rescue Plan Act money, which the city received in the amount of almost $6 million, and develop a plan as well for infrastructure funding that would support development. And so this presentation is basically laying out that plan as staff sees it in terms of what is going to create the greatest value and the biggest impact for growth in Selma. So the council is free to interject with any questions or clarifications as necessary from the public. There is going to be an opportunity at the end of the presentation for questions, for input from the developers that are both here in person and on the line, as well as the general public. So thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to hearing from you after the presentation. So the goals for this meeting are number one, to obtain approval from the City Council regarding the ARPA allocations. Number two, to obtain approval from the City Council regarding Rockwell Pond Park and a new proposed park project, which I'll be discussing in more detail. And also to provide an overview of existing development projects and expectations for developers. So just a little bit, I wanted to, give a sort of broad picture of development in Selma and our needs when it comes to housing. Obviously, commercial development is important in Selma, and it supports our sales tax base. But one of the state's highest priorities at the moment is our housing needs, and the critical juncture at which we find ourselves both as a state and a community in order to really be able to find housing for all residents, for all citizens at every income level. And the Central Valley and the entire state is currently going through a process of assessing its regional housing needs allocation, the 6th cycle. And that process is almost done. It's proceeding with Fresno COG taking the lead. And what we've discovered is that the state, as of December, is going to be allocating a responsibility, a target allocation for Fresno County as a whole of 58,298 new housing units. And of that number, Selma's share will be 1,456 new housing units. And that's as of January of 2022. And I included on this slide a breakdown of how the state would like to see those housing units broken down in terms of affordability and the demographics of the individuals who can afford the housing. And as you can see from the screen, we have a target of 385 units that would be obtainable by very low income residents, 157 by low income residents, 224 by moderate income residents, and 690 by above moderate income residents. And certainly the above moderate is the largest number, but as we talk about development and housing, we have to keep in mind that we have to have a good balance and a good mix of housing for all income levels within the community. What you see on the screen now is a graphic representation of the active projects, both commercial and residential. Most of this is residential, with the only commercial projects being Selma Grove, which is depicted in the yellow there, just west of the 99. And then we have a mixed use project along Nebraska and Highland, Mr. Baldev Josan's project, as well as Selma Crossings down at the very south, that purple bluish color there. And one of the main things I wanted to highlight with this graph or with this image is that most of the residential development and growth is being concentrated on the southwest part of Selma. And we do have Amberwood over on the northeast side of Selma. We have a proposed subdivision on the north side of Selma along Dinuba. But really, the growth is planned to happen on the southwest side of Selma, west of the 99. And I'm going to be going into this in a little bit more detail, but all of those projects south of Rose Avenue, where my cursor is kind of hovering there, Rose Avenue, and west of the 99, all of these projects that you see here in this general area are all dependent on a lift station called Clarkson Lift Station, which is actually way further south on McCall, almost towards Kingsburg. But it serves all of this area south of Rose and west of the 99. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward with this discussion. And what I've provided on the screen is a list of sewer projects, wastewater collection projects that are in need of funding. And these are projects that would support active developments like Amberwood, like the Dinuba map for KB Homes, like Selma Grove, Mr. Josan's project, Mr. Hinesley's project on Nebraska and Highland. We have some multifamily apartments on Nebraska and Highland. So all of this infrastructure needs, all of these infrastructure needs would support those active projects. So in the blue next to the names of those projects, those sewer projects, I've also listed the cost, the estimated cost of those infrastructure projects. And then in red, I've listed the number of housing units, both single family residential and multifamily, that would result as a result of those infrastructure projects being completed. So the East Selma wastewater trunk line, for example, that represents Amberwood, the infrastructure that's necessary for Amberwood to be built, and specifically phase 1 that Lennar is planning in Selma. That would generate 270 single-family residences. The North Selma line, 336 single-family residences, give or take. And then Clarkson lift station upgrade at almost $3 million would generate an additional almost 400 single-family residences and 347 multifamily units, give or take. And then Rose lift station upgrade would generate an additional 792 multifamily units. And those are large numbers. And I didn't include commercial development square footage, and obviously that's important too because it generates sales taxes and then it attracts more commercial development. So it's a good cycle that's generated by commercial development. But on this next slide here, I've indicated, I've totaled up all the units, single family residences that would be developed by those active projects, assuming we had the infrastructure necessary to build those projects. And we arrive at a total of 2,150 units. And that compares to our projected regional housing needs allocation target of 1,456 units. Now, granted, not all the 2,150 units, will count towards the RHNA allocation, but that's still a very large number, and it will get us a large way. And just, I forgot to mention that RHNA allocation is for 8 years as of 2023. That's when that period begins and goes all the way to 2031. So if in 8 years we can develop 2,150 additional units, we will be in a really good position and we'll have a lot of growth within Selma. All of that infrastructure from the previous screen, the total cost adds up to just over $20 million, $20,178,900. So I'd like to take a moment to also talk about affordable housing. And, we had Yvette Quiroga from the county make some comments earlier. Her group at the county is responsible for allocating money that comes to the county through CDBG, through HOME, that can help build affordable housing. But the point I want to make with this is that there's an opportunity to build affordable housing with each housing development that comes into town. And just because, we're building market rate housing, let's say through Lennar, KB, there's also opportunities to include in multifamily and single family projects, 5 units here, 10 units there that will be attainable by low to moderate income residents. So something to keep in mind as we're working and developing partnerships with developers, that there are opportunities there to include smaller amounts of low-income housing, which will also in turn assist the city in obtaining grants to fund the infrastructure that would benefit not just the affordable housing components, but the market rate components of those projects as well. So it benefits everyone to look at including affordable housing into the projects. And obviously, I mentioned before, the state of California values affordable housing very highly and is making a lot of funding and resources available for this purpose. And as part of the development impact fee update, we will consider an opportunity to make affordable housing projects benefit from discounted fees when appropriate as a way to spur affordable housing. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the plan. Go ahead. Yes.
Sorry. On these RENA numbers for the jurisdiction that we're talking about for the very low, moderate, is that based on Selma's income limits or Fresno County?
Those are Selma's income limits. Yep. So staff has been in the process of exploring over the last few months different funding options for infrastructure. We've looked at EIFDs, IRFDs, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But EIFDs, if anybody in the public is not familiar, stands for Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, and that's a tool that the legislature developed around 2015 that helps local agencies develop funding for infrastructure to support both commercial and residential projects, just economic development in general. It's a tax increment financing district or financing mechanism. Selma does not have access to an EIFD currently, and that's been a point that has been discussed pretty extensively in previous council meetings. So we'll leave that out of the conversation for now. But I did want to discuss another option that staff has been evaluating called Infrastructure and Revitalization Financing Districts. And this tool is similar to an EIFD, but it does not require a finding of completion from the state of California if the district, the IRFD district, does not overlap with former redevelopment district boundaries. And this is not a tax, so this would not, if the city moved forward with something like an IRFD, it would not be a tax. Rather, it would be a tax increment mechanism where any increase in the value of a property, any property tax increase would be used to pay for the infrastructure to develop that property. So we have a consultant on the line who is decided to join our conversation. It's not somebody who's under contract with the city, but somebody who is very knowledgeable about this sort of district and financing mechanism. Mr. Joseph Dieguez from Cosmot. Joseph, are you on the line?
Good evening. Hello. Yes.
Hi, Joseph. I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe talk more broadly about IRFDs and the benefits and how they compare to Mello-Roos districts and community facilities districts, if you're still available to do that.
Of course. Happy to. Thank you for the opportunity. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As the city manager covered, any tool that uses tax increment financing or TIF, the idea is to draw a district boundary around parcels where future growth is expected. Typically, that future growth is from new development or redevelopment of underutilized properties. The idea is that as the property value grows over time with that new development, these tools allow the taxing agencies that get a piece of the property tax pie, like the city and the county primarily, to set aside almost like a retirement account, some portion of those future property tax dollars, zero portion of existing property tax dollars, but just some portion of future property tax dollars into a special purpose bucket prioritized for infrastructure. In this case, that could be this tool, the IRFD. It is not, it is similar to tools being used in the city of Fresno, in the city of Sanger, being evaluated by the county, an unincorporated county jurisdiction, county of Fresno that is, the county of Madera, does have 3 of the similar district, the EIFDs, in place and is evaluating additional ones. But the idea is, again, not to add a tax on a parcel, as the city manager said, but to allow the local agencies, at least the city, potentially a city-county partnership, to allow both entities to set aside some portion of future dollars, like a retirement account, prioritizing infrastructure. We've been evaluating in different circumstances, actually overlaying these with the next item on the list, which is a CFD, a community facilities or Melrose district, which is indeed adding a special tax to specific parcels included within the boundary. Community facilities districts are very common. I believe your advisor is also on the line. Eric Scriven, I believe he's worked on many of these. They're very common in California as a means to generate an immediate revenue stream for funding infrastructure. These tools can actually interact quite nicely together, where community facilities district, by enabling an immediate revenue stream, could be utilized to issue debt in the near term to pay for infrastructure. And then as the actual private development comes in over time, the EIFD or the IRFD, the tax increment tool, can capture all of that value and then be used as a reimbursement or a takeout financing sort of mechanism as a complement to that CFD. And so it's been done several places in Northern California. We're currently doing it in several places in Southern California. It's just a way of basically utilizing all the potential tools in your bucket, in your toolbox, to maximize your ability to pay for infrastructure. It's just one example scenario that we've discussed with staff. That's it at this point.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Question
Joseph.
at this point.
Go ahead.
So, Villegas, Mr. Villegas?
Dieguez.
Okay.
Dieguez.
I listened to what you just said, and it sounds very interesting. And I didn't realize you could use both. You could put both together. That's exciting. You mentioned that the city and the county work together on this. In terms of land that's been annexed, we have a 68-32 split tax sharing agreement with the county right now as a city. How would that apply to this IRFD? Would essentially 2/3 of that appreciation revert back to the county per a tax sharing agreement, or does all of that accrue to the city that annexed that land?
It would follow. Thank you very much. The rules that would absolutely follow the property tax share agreement that's been in place, the 68-32 split. What becomes available through the IRFD tool is the ability of one entity to contribute whatever it wants out of the 68% to this district, and the entity that receives the 32% contribute whatever it wants, if anything, to this district. And so it doesn't change that split. It's just offers an ability to contribute a portion of that split in the future. But the property tax sharing agreement, comes first. This would not undo that.
And are most of the reimbursement agreements that are out there for developers that put in these or have these sewer lines put in for them, and they have a reimbursement agreement, are most of those Melrose type districts where there's a community facilities district and the residents pay in, or is it a one-time deal when the residents pay in when they buy the houses?
It depends on the specific mechanism. CFDs, as you mentioned, are paid by the property owners, the home buyers who pay them over time on their property tax rolls. But there's the reimbursement agreements are a reimbursement with either the city or future or other property owners to reimburse the original builder of the infrastructure who financed it, either to pay off a bond or to pay off debt or to pay back the developer.
So the developer, they pass this on, this cost that they have to pay back to the city per their impact fees. They pass it on to the buyers or the property owners of their properties, their homes. And that happens over time. Doesn't happen all at once, or does it keep going? Are they billed on a continuous cycle through the CFD? We know once those fees for, I'm just trying to capture what is paid for with the CFD. Is it only for the infrastructure, or are there other expenses that it pays for?
Yeah, the CFD would pay, the tax for the CFD would pay for whatever was funded through the CFD bond issuance. So whether that's sewer infrastructure or park infrastructure, there's also, there's also like LMDs and things of that nature that would be paid for. So it really just depends on what was built and how long that takes to pay off that bond, that debt that was issued. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph.
I would completely agree that we see what we call services CFDs and infrastructure CFDs. Sometimes CFDs are just done to pay for ongoing services, sometimes to augment police and fire beyond a quote unquote standard level of service, as well as to pay for the maintenance of infrastructure. And sometimes we see CFDs used to pay for one-time infrastructure expenditures, and those may be issued for a 30-year debt. So that obligation on the homeowners is 30 years in that scenario. And in many cases, we see CFDs that have both of those components, both a component to pay for initial infrastructure as well as a component to pay
So the
for
ongoing service would be like an LLMD. So you could have three of these. You could have an LLMD and a CFD and an IRFD and all those letters all at one time. It seems like the city has those landscape and lighting maintenance districts. But like Vineyard Estates, which is what 110, they're in their third phase of single family homes on the west side of town. They have another fee out there. There's another one that funds public safety. It's not just LLMD. And I believe that's charged every year as well. Is that something that would be brought up under this, or does that come up per development or per affordable housing, per area?
Yeah, it depends on the specific infrastructure and what the developer paid for upfront, and how that was incorporated into the cost of the property. The LMDs are usually an arrangement with the city to reimburse us for the city staff doing maintenance. I'm not familiar with the public safety fee for Vineyard Estates. I'd have to look more into that, but yeah, it really just depends on each project and how it's structured.
Joseph, I have a quick question. So I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. The tax increment financing district is going to apply strictly to the new development, correct? Not to existing development. And then my other question would be for Mello-Roos districts and HOAs, because I've seen, these new developments that have the HOAs. So what would be the difference?
Question. Joseph, would you like to tackle that? Or did you want me to answer that?
I can happy to take a shot first. So I believe you have it exactly right on the first portion of the question. We strategically draw the boundaries to capture only new development typically, as opposed to including within the boundary areas that are already existing. In our view, the general fund is typically relying on the growth of the existing areas for its future budget needs, and it's the strategic properties that are available for future development that allow you to use this tool more effectively. So I believe you have it exactly right. I apologize because the second portion of the question just escaped me.
It was with regard to HOAs and whether that's a completely separate, and I can answer that. HOAs are usually formed when there is a private facility like a street or a park that's not going to be maintained by the city. It's not going to be dedicated to the city, but it's going to be maintained privately by the residents. And so if the developer wants to establish the HOA, or if they're required to by the city for some reason, then that would be a separate fee, because then they have to generate that revenue to maintain the street, maintain the park, the landscaping, et cetera. But I don't believe, I'm not sure if we have any HOAs in town yet. There's one that's going in, but we don't have any at this time. Yeah.
So the Mello-Roos district would be then to capture additional funding, correct?
Yes, so the Mello-Roos district would be formed to place a tax on the property tax rolls for each of those properties that are part of the district. And then you, based on that future revenue, you can issue a bond. So you know you're going to have 330 homes that are each paying, let's say, $100 a month or a year on their property taxes. So you can package that into a bond. That bond can be used immediately to build the infrastructure. And then that bond is paid off through the monthly property tax payments or annual property tax
It
payments.
could go over 20 years, 30
20,
years.
30
or
years,
whatever.
exactly.
Okay.
Mhm. Any other questions for Mr. Dieguez? Am I saying your name correctly, Joseph?
You are, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your input. And if you wouldn't mind sticking around in case other questions pop up.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you. And going down further in this list, I've listed the iBank loan. We've talked about the iBank loan in previous council meetings, and we don't have a formal pre-approval from the iBank loan. We requested $20 million to finance the sewer projects that I listed in a previous slide. My conversation today with iBank was that the factor that they primarily look at, cash flow, looks really good for Selma. They don't see any issues. However, at this time, they weren't at the point where they can say, yes, go ahead and formally apply. And then once we're invited to formally apply, then it's, a 3 to 6 month process to be able to close that financing. So far, so good. And we've been in constant contact with them and for the park as well, for Rockwell. That's an initial conversation that we had with them as well. They haven't given us any confirmation yet. So for purposes of this discussion, we are, our recommendations are based on the assumption that we would get approved for a $20 million iBank loan for sewer improvements. And then certainly we have a lot of irons in the fire with regard to government affairs consultants, speaking to our state representatives, federal representatives to capture the state budget surplus, because we anticipate that there will be a very significant surplus at the state level. Estimates I've heard I know the budget came out, but the draft budget came out, but originally it was $30 to $50 billion that was going to be available as a surplus and for earmarks. And we do have our government affairs consultant, Chris Com, Jason Sagan on the line as well, if he wants to add anything. But everyone right now is seeing an opportunity, and because it is an election year, there's even greater opportunity to capture some of that funding. Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good to see you guys virtually. Just real quick to add, thank you first for inviting us to be part of this discussion. Fernando and I last week made some headway up in Sacramento on a couple of items. One is what he was just talking about, the governmental affairs and the state budget surplus. We've got a draft white paper that Fernando and I have been working on. We've discussed it with both our state assembly member and state senator, and both are very actively listening and gonna help us in whatever they can do. The other item, and I don't know, Fernando, if you saw it, but we got word back from Assembly Member Arambula's office where they're considering putting in a spot bill, and they've sent some language over to Legislative Council on the EIFD issue. And so we've got some movement there at this point. We should know by Monday if they're going to introduce some language. By putting the spot bill down, it gives us and gives them some more time to work on it. It puts a placeholder for us. But we had a pretty long discussion with his chief of staff, Eusebio Padilla, last week. And Fernando was a great asset there, helping us, get that point across. And so we did just receive some word that they're highly considering a spot bill at this point and have language that is being drafted by Ledge Council. So just wanted to give you guys that update.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And I did see your email, by the way, just didn't have a chance to respond, but thanks for the update.
No problem.
So hopefully, those efforts on Chriscom's and Jason's end, realize some good results, and will help us offset some of these other funding mechanisms that we're looking at. And then the pension obligation bond, I added it here, not necessarily because we can use the pension obligation bond for infrastructure, but the reason that the city council is considering moving forward with the pension obligation bond is that it will save us up to $500,000 annually from the general fund. And that's based on, estimates and projections, but that is something that the city council, once that bond is issued and in place, we would be able to count on those savings depending on the terms at that time. And then, pursuant to this conversation, one of our recommendations, which will be compiled in a longer list at the end of this presentation, will be to engage a consultant for an amount up to $50,000 to really look hard at the above options to finance all types of infrastructure, whether it's streets, storm drain, transportation, parks. We're going to look at all of our infrastructure comprehensively with these tools like IRFDs and CFDs and see how that we can leverage all of them. But we need to develop a good plan, a good funding and financing plan and strategy first. So we are going to be seeking that approval tonight. This is moving on to a different topic. This is really exciting for me to talk about because, we've had lots of conversations before about the need in the community for a park. And, it's well established that, the city has not seen a new park built in quite a while. And we have sports leagues, soccer leagues, football leagues, who just don't have anywhere to practice. We have $4.4 million from the state of California that was granted to us to build a park, which is Rockwell Pond Park. And unfortunately, the $4.4 million is only about a quarter of the total cost of the park, of phase one of the park. Staff reached out to a local developer who has an active project in Selma and owns a substantial amount of land within the community. And we proposed the idea of a public-private partnership opportunity. That developer, that property owner is on the line. His name is Efren Yanez with Yanez Construction. And he was 100% open and agreed to the concept of donating a 10-acre parcel of land adjacent to his proposed development at Thompson and Blaine on the southwest part of town to be able to develop a park that's big enough to support multiple soccer/football fields and to still meet the requirements of the grant that we have through Prop 68. We see this as a win-win situation for Selma, really, because we're able to use the grant money that we have. And I'll talk about this a little bit, how the state's approval comes into play. We get, additional housing around that park. And it's a good location that is surrounded by existing housing, and especially in a low-income part of the community, where low-income residents could also enjoy this facility without having to drive. We talk a lot about the impacts to Floral and having to travel across town. So tonight, we'll be seeking council's approval to continue the discussions with this developer, with Mr. Yanez and his team, about what this donation would look like and any fee credits that the council would be willing to give, to offset the land donation. But we are really excited. And this next slide just gives a little bit more detail about the location of the proposed park, 10-acre land donation. I spoke to the State Parks Department. They are completely open to a new location for the grant funds. And this location actually has better demographics than the Rockwell Pond area in terms of what the state was looking at with the grant. You know, the number of houses surrounding the area, the income levels. So it's a really good location for purposes of the grant itself. We could potentially accommodate 2 to 3 lit soccer fields, playgrounds, and a splash pad. This would probably require a scope amendment to our grant project with the state, which after speaking with the state Parks Department staff, that would not be an issue. It would take some time for them to look at, evaluate it, and approve. But my understanding is that the state has already requested an extension of the Prop 68 deadline for an additional 12 months, which would give us until 2025 to build a new park and design it. That extension won't be formally approved until potentially July, but everything that I've been told is that historically, you know, these types of requests have never been denied by the legislature for parks departments for extensions on grants. So we will be seeking, staff will be requesting a total of $300,000 from the ARPA allocation to supplement this potential project if the council approves staff to move forward with this 10-acre park. Any
I have a
questions?
quick
Go ahead.
question
Yes.
too.
So, oh, go ahead. So what kind of credits would be requested, do you think, from Mr. Yanis in this very, very generous offer? What, you know, how much would that detract from, I would assume, a residential project that Yanis is going to be putting in, he would be paying into the Clarkson lift station upgrade, is that correct? So is that the idea that if this land is donated, some of the costs that would be passed on, some of the reimbursement costs for the upgrade of that Clarkson lift station would be forgiven?
It would be offset by the land donation, sure, based on the value of the property. And, you know, there's also Parkland fees. Originally, he was going to be required to build a 3-acre park based on the number of housing units he was planning. And so now it would be 10 acres. And then we would work with him on those fee credits. Nothing has been really finalized. I think some of the most appropriate offsets would be on the sewer side, but you know, we just haven't had that discussion because we haven't, you know, received direction from council to move forward with that.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Okay, for Mr. Yanis's development that we're looking to take place on Thompson and Blaine, due to the allocations by income tier, is that going to be considered a very low income housing, low income, moderate? Do we have specifics as to what it's going to be? I mean, is it a little bit of everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mr. Yanis, are you, or Mr. Spate, are you on the line to maybe address that question?
Yes, this is Tim Spate. I'm on the line. I don't know if is Ephraim on the line. Ephraim, are you there? Hello? He may not be. At this time, we're projecting approximately $300,000 sales prices, depending on what prices do between now and when we release the homes for sale. So I don't know where that fits into your levels of you know, low income, medium income, and high income. I'm not sure where it falls. Maybe you could help me, Fernando.
Yeah, I think we would have to look because it depends on the area median income, but we can get back to you with that information. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think our goal is to have a lower priced house just because more people can qualify. Is kind of our thoughts on the matter.
And do we know how many?
I know that the map has undergone some revisions, right, Mr. Spate?
Yeah, I believe there were 111 lots in the north phase, but we're going to be revising that because of the potential donation of the 10 acres or so that's going to be required for the soccer fields and the splash pads and all that. We've been talking with Fernando about it, and we like the concept, but we do need to work out the details of it. But we are definitely on board with the concept and the process. We just have to work out the details. Our goal is to have homes that are affordable. They're very nice homes. We'd love to tour city councils members if they'd like to. We've offered to Fernando to see the homes that we build currently, and we'd be very open to that.
Question was actually in the lines of the concept. Since we're already in that process, would we just be able to take that work that's already been done and maybe scale it down so that we can take it over that park, since we're still going to be using, or potentially we could potentially that 4.4 million,
Yeah, I think
something that
we can
since we've
adapt.
already.
Absolutely. I think we can adapt some of those elements of the original Rockwell concept into this project.
And where would that leave the consultant for the project vendor, the project manager, and then the design piece of the contract?
Sure.
Would that stay, go away, transfer? Have we reached that yet?
We haven't considered those things because we just haven't had, received approval to move forward with those conversations. But my hope is that we could continue with the same contractors and the same consultants to just kind of make a seamless transition to this project and just make amendments to the existing contracts.
Spending money again or wasting.
Yeah, we don't have to go through another.
Start over, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a
Bidding
scope
process.
amendment to the existing contracts. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So most of this I already talked about. I do want to point out on the lower cost of development item here, I used an incorrect figure that based on the latest figures for the cost of development of Rockwell Pond Park, it's actually closer to $900,000 per acre. So we'd be looking at a cost of about $9 million for a 10-acre park. My apologies for that error.
This, so we're comparing 9 million to possibly 30 million.
24 million for the full build out.
I'm thinking 30 because of the time and
Yeah.
supply and all of that. So
And I will point out that what we have available at the moment to build out a park, in addition to the 4.5 million from the state, is another additional 2.5 million roughly from impact fees and TOT and other street funds, because this project will require some improvements to Thompson Street, for example. So really what we have in our pocket right now for the development of this park would be about 7.5 million. And then I am requesting another $300,000 from the ARPA allocation.
That would still leave just a little bit of a shortfall. That would leave about
Small
1.5
shortfall.
million.
Yep.
For the new park,
For the new park.
the new location.
Yeah, and I think that's based on the per acre cost for Rockwell. And there are elements on this park that we won't have to put in a lift station, for example, for this park. So that'll bring down the per acre cost. We won't have to put in a land bridge. That'll bring down the cost by another $1 million, right? So although I'm using that per acre cost for Rockwell, I think the per acre cost is probably going to be closer to the $700,000 number. Yeah. This is a much flatter area than Rockwell as well. So a lot of dirt work, and it's just a smaller area, which means less work on the dirt work. But at the same time, I think we all agree that Rockwell Pond Park is a valuable project, and especially with the commercial development, planned commercial development adjacent to it. My recommendation and staff's recommendation would be to continue to keep that project alive by moving forward with the purchase of the property from the county. We are, you'll see in a later slide that staff is requesting funding for development of a master plan, infrastructure master plan, which includes the parks master plan, and Rockwell Pond Park will be sort of the centerpiece of that master plan, in addition to new other parks around the city. And for that reason is why we're requesting to be able to at least, temporarily suspend activity on Rockwell Pond Park if the council chooses to move forward with this 10-acre park, but still move forward with the purchase of the 34 acres of Rockwell Pond Park.
So that would include that extra 5 that we've been talking about as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Because this would be a stopgap measure, this new park, this 10 acres, but it's just not going to accommodate the future growth of Selma, especially with all this residential that's going to be coming in. There's going to be a need for a new park. Since we haven't had one since '89, this will help, but it's not going to be our final destination. I still
Correct.
think we need to pursue that Rockwell Pond Park.
Yeah,
There
and-
is, but there is a need for a park on the east side. And that's something we gotta talk about too, so, but there is needs,
True.
there is gonna be needs for parks.
No, and I think, before we get to be able to address a park, in the Rockwell area, we also have to address the congestion issues on Floral and the infrastructure, the build out of Stillman and those kinds of things. So once we have those things in order, then I think Rockwell Pond will be a much easier proposition and cheaper too. Well, the cost is going to continue to go up, but at least we won't have to deal with, those other aspects of the
Some of
development.
that'll be maybe solved as well by the housing that's coming in that area as
That's right.
well. And the impact fees that will be paid on that will need to go towards new park, right? Given the requirement of the city for park
Absolutely.
space for each new development.
100% correct. So just to sum up, my discussion with regard to the ARPA funds and the recommended allocations. I think I missed the slide. Here we go. So one of the things that staff has been waiting for has been the issuance of the final rule for the use of the ARPA funds. We had been operating under the interim final rule for about a year. And it finally was released in mid-January. And staff is very happy that the council waited on, spending these funds, because one of the things that showed up in the final rule was the provision for a standard allowance of up to $10 million. So what the standard allowance provision allows is that any recipient can claim that allowance and designate up to $10 million as net revenue loss resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. So all we have to do is check a box on the reporting form and say we're claiming, the full $6 million as net revenue loss, and then use that money for general services, essentially what we would use general fund money for. And so that helped out a lot of communities, particularly smaller cities, because a lot of the larger cities used more or received more than 10 million. But this keeps us from having to actually calculate the loss that we incurred because of COVID, and we can just say $10 million, that's what we lost, and we're putting it back in the general fund or using it for whatever council decides.
Standard deduction we can take for under 10 million.
That's correct. General, the rule says government services is what you can use it for, which, as we know, is very broad.
Pretty broad.
No
Yeah, it's right.
particular definition of government services, right?
No.
Common law. Okay.
Not that I found. So with that background, I'd like to move on to our recommendations, and our recommendation to the council is to go ahead and claim the standard allowance for the full ARPA allocation to Selma of $5,938,668, and then proceed to allocate $3 million to the upgrade of Clarkson Avenue lift station, $2 million for personnel salary updates and new positions, which I will talk about. And I thought I had a slide unless I missed something. Go back to that. And then $2 million for personnel salary updates, $450,000 for existing park improvements, $300,000 for the new 10-acre park development, $138,668 for development impact fee study or infrastructure and facilities master plans, including parks master plan and broadband master plans. I had a couple of conversations this morning about the importance of broadband and looking at our facilities and what we're going to need to be able to support remote work and education, and in the time of COVID and even and beyond, which I agreed with is really important. So definitely want to look at that. So the development impact fee study, um, I asked our interim finance director, Mr. Sanchez, I think he's in the room, to look at our existing development impact fees that we have in hand and to allocate 2% of each of those funds to be able to use for an impact fee update. And we were able to come up with about $90,000 for a impact fee study. So that frees us up to be able to use those funds for the update. So now we can focus the 138,000 on master plans for infrastructure. And
Get a cost on what the consultant would charge or?
we got a rough estimate from one consultant, and it's going to be in the ballpark of about $60,000 to $80,000. Yeah, so we'll probably be pretty well covered. And then we're requesting $50,000 for the infrastructure funding and financing analysis plan to look at IRFDs and CFDs in Melrose districts. So I did want to talk a little bit about city infrastructure improvements, and because we are requesting, staff is requesting that $3 million be used for the Clarkson Avenue lift station. And I wanted to make sure that it's understood by the public that this expenditure is not a gift to developers. We are going to be entering into reimbursement agreements to be reimbursed over time through impact fees and these agreements for the cost of this infrastructure. It's just at the moment that cost is so high that the developers, it's a roadblock to developers to be able to fund that, because the first person to build who's going to need to use the Clarkson lift station is going to need to build the entire lift station, but they're not going to use the full capacity of that lift station. So they're paying for something that they're not using, which none of us want to do, right? So that's creating a bottleneck right now. And so if the city puts it in first, then, over time, these developers are paying us rather than the first developer to start building. And so that's going to catalyze, we feel, a much needed residential and commercial development. And generally speaking, the way it works is that the developer would upgrade the infrastructure to accommodate the growth. But in this case, we have so much need that it's impossible for these developers to put all the money in themselves. And so in this, from the process that we're proposing, the ARPA funds can actually be used as seed money and then continually reinvested and recycled as it is paid back. So we put the money in, we get reimbursed, those reimbursements pay for future infrastructure, we get paid back for those, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of what I highlighted in this slide here. But in order for that to really work well, we do need to update our development impact fees, because they're right now, generally speaking, you want to update them every 5 years. It's been 7 years since the last one was adopted, and so they're not up to date, and we do need to bring those up to current market conditions. And along those lines, I did want to, since we have the development community in the room and online on Zoom, the city council has expressed a desire to really find out from developers, what's your skin in the game and what are you willing to commit? If the city puts this money towards infrastructure that you need for your projects, what are you willing to commit in return? And obviously we have a great commitment, in the form of a land donation, which would be partially offset with fee credits. But also, the agreements to standard reimbursement agreements, right? And then supporting our development impact fee study. And actually, we're in an interesting position where the request to update our fees actually came from developers in this case, because they recognize that our fees are way out of whack and need to be updated. So we're in a good position there. But then also, my second bullet point here, develop according to the city's general plan policies. Whoops. Our general plan calls for up to 5 acres per 1,000 residents to be built by developers in subdivisions. And historically, we've accepted the payments in lieu of, but we're seeing now, because of rising costs for land, for labor, for infrastructure, those impact fees that we're collecting quickly, become outdated, and we're not able to actually afford to purchase land and build these parks. So it might be in most cases, some cases, better policy to have the developers just build it themselves. And now we have green space and we don't have to worry about, obviously we can look at large regional parks that no one developer is going to build, like Rockwell. That's certainly a regional park that the city probably needs to do itself, definitely needs to do itself, and it's going to have a regional attraction and economic development benefits. But for smaller neighborhood parks, we definitely need to be holding developers accountable. And I wouldn't say accountable, just, enforcing our own guidelines, for development of these parks. And then also just design guidelines in general for the house, for the buildings, and making sure that they're adhering. We're in the process through our zoning code update of implementing this architectural design guidelines and other types of design guidelines that will help guide these developers and help Selma, as it builds and grows, look cohesive as a community, right?
Question on the reimbursement.
Sure.
So I think we all remember 2007 Vineyard Estates, the infrastructure to nowhere that started going in, and the lack of a subdivision bond on that, in the city holding the bag, right, till a developer came in and kind of bailed the city out and developed that. And look at what we have now. We have a beautiful, three-phase single family home subdivision. What happens if we experience a down cycle economically and the developers just don't have the capital? I'm sure they have the intent to build, but if they don't have the capital, the working capital, they just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean what happens to those reimbursement agreements? And can those reimbursement agreements be, I don't know, bonded, or a letter of intent, or a guarantee, some sort of financial guarantee pegged to those, just in the event of a financial downturn, that the city does get reimbursed?
Sure.
In the event that there are bankruptcies or there are difficulties on the developer's part, understandably, to meet those commitments in the event of the inevitable down cycle in the business?
That's a very good point. Generally, as practice here, and for me personally, we've always requested, or not always, obviously not always, requested bonds from developers for the public improvements. And that's usually the extent of what you can request bonds for: the public improvements, the streets, sidewalks, et cetera, the infrastructure. You can never predict a downturn, and you do have to take measures to mitigate the risks that are associated with downturns through bonding requirements. But at the end of the day, this infrastructure is gonna need to be there for the recovery and for, the next cycle starts. And yeah, it'll take a while, and nobody likes to see half-built lots and subdivisions. And unfortunately, with the Great Recession, we experienced that. And fortunately, we had, builders come in and pick up those pieces and turn it into something, nice for the community. So yeah, I would say, we also can do liens on properties as well. As part of reimbursement agreements, we can place a lien on the property to be able to recover that cost. It's just, there's a lot of mechanisms that are out there, and it takes agreement and negotiation with the developers, because the city does have to mitigate its risks. Yeah.
A contract in writing.
Exactly. Yeah. Written agreements. Absolutely. 100%.
Can I say something, not in regards to that? Following back what you were saying about our general plan, I think that a lot of the most important thing for us to do with our general plan is to be disciplined. Discipline is staying with the general plan and understanding that the developer holds what they're building. Many times, and I'll use my neighborhood on Orange Street. We have a ponding basin that doesn't have a fence. And we have a developer that develops nice homes, but because he developed good homes, we gave him an access not to fulfill what was the requirements. So I think that the city of Selma needs to, as we're developing this and doing this, we need to be conscientious to developing our city using just the general plan. That's the reason why it's built. If you follow the general plan and you follow it, we're good. You offset from the general plan, it costs us money. So I just reiterate that to you, Fernando. You're doing a great job, but I just want to add that to, discipline on the general plan is very, very important.
Thank you. I agree. That's good feedback. And, the general plan is one of the tools. We have development standards in our zoning ordinance that also enforce, what improvements people are required to make, block walls, behind parks and all those kinds of things. So we do need to do a good job of enforcing those rules that we create ourselves. And another commitment I hope to get folks on board with is the affordable housing projects. I talked about that earlier, and it's going to work with some projects and it's not going to work with other projects. And as we become more well versed into the funding mechanisms that the county offers, I had a really good call with Yvette from the county today about some of the funding that's out there for not just affordable housing projects, but market rate projects that include at least an element or 1 or 2 units of affordable housing that would pay for outside infrastructure like traffic signals or lift stations or sewer lines or water lines. So definitely something for us to pursue and to continue to develop those partnerships. And then we talked about the updated impact fee study, which if we receive approval to start going out for that, then we expect to be complete by August or September of 2022, about a 6-month timeline. And they gave us about a 4 to 6 month timeline. I'm hoping it's closer to the 4. So, and then just in general, commitment to actually move forward with the projects. And, most of the developers that we have in the room and online are extremely committed. And the conversations I've had with everyone are that we want to be in Selma. We have all the money that we need, except for the cost of upgrading our infrastructure. And so, they're just waiting for something to happen on the infrastructure side. So as long as we can get the commitment from the developers to actually move forward. And I know there's some, who already have, some of the commercial developers who have agreements with companies to build, restaurants and hotels and things like that. It's just, they can't build yet. So. And this is a slide I was looking for earlier, the personnel, and the money that we're requesting to be able to support our staff. Selma is behind in, let me rephrase that. Selma hasn't kept up well with our compensation for our employees at every level, management, line staff, all the different departments. And we need to fix that from my perspective as the head administrator of the city. We're losing people because they are getting much better offers, compensation offers by other agencies. They're getting better promotion opportunities because we don't have the positions in our salary master schedule to be able to promote them. And those are things that we've discussed and we'll be bringing forward. But we need to be able to know what the current market conditions are for salaries for our staff and bring our current salaries in line with that, because there's no question since I've been with the city of Selma, I've observed that we are really under-resourced and understaffed. And that adds a lot of pressure, creates burnout for our staff and our employees. And, credit to everyone, the entire Selma team. We have great people here and they just want to be able to feed their families and, afford their bills and not have to look for a position further away because they're not getting paid what they're worth here in Selma. And it's management's job to be able to come up with solutions for that. And so in order to do that, we need the funding, and we've identified positions and departments, areas that need a lot of help. And it's really all areas. I mean, I listed them here: community development. We need more planners to be able to move projects along. We need engineering techs to be able to look at plans and monitor civil projects. We need accountants. We need analysts for our grants to be able to track grants. We've lost money in the past because we don't have the people to keep track of the grants, and we don't spend it, so we have to give it back. We need executive assistants. We need human resources. We have one HR person for the entire 150-person staff in the city of Selma. We have a human resources manager, and that is not nearly sufficient, because then we're not able to recruit. We don't have somebody who can build a pipeline to be able to develop that talent and that, steady stream of people, because we're always going to have turnover for other reasons. But as long as that turnover isn't because of lack of growth opportunities, because of lack of good pay, turnover is going to happen. So we also need streets and parks maintenance workers. Our public works department at one time was at 18 people, and we've continued to grow. And now the city has continued to grow, but now we're at 12 people, and we're losing people because they're getting paid more in other agencies, and it creates a lot of stress on our workers. And it's a hard job anyway to be a public works employee, being out there in the sun all day, and you get injuries from carrying heavy equipment, using the lawnmower, and so there's a lot of downtime for somebody that gets injured, but that's from in a department that's already understaffed, so it puts even more pressure on our staff. So it's a really tough situation. And then we have police and fire that is always going to have needs because of the growing complexity of public safety. Police and fire do a great job of being fully staffed, and credit to our police commander and our fire chief for making sure that our personnel is taken care of in those departments. And so to that effect, I'd like to request, staff would like to request $2 million from the ARPA funding to develop a citywide comprehensive compensation study, and then use those $2 million to bring our salaries in line with current market conditions, as well as add new positions. And the details of those positions will come at a later time. We need to be able to have the framework, these $2 million in which to work with. And then, as we identify the areas that most need staffing, we'll bring it back to council, with the exact positions and what it's going to cost and what the exact impact to the budget is going to be. Right now, we just need to know that we're going to have this money available to be able to take on those activities.
Question?
Sure.
2 million, one-time money for continuing expenses.
Right.
That is not the way it's usually done. That's not good management. And you know that. Why are you violating that principle in this case? What's your justification for that?
Yeah, and rather than it being a violation, it's including the knowledge that of our finances, that we're in a pretty solid financial position. We had a call a couple of weeks ago with HDL, who tracks our sales tax revenues. And we are, through the pandemic, our sales taxes increased 13% in the third quarter of 21 compared to the third quarter of 20. So our sales taxes are doing really good. There's other parts, that maybe weren't as good. But in general, the city of Selma has a very good general fund balance that we anticipate, and all our projections show, and not just our projections, state projections and more regional projections show continued growth. Obviously, nobody can predict a economic downturn. And at that point, if an economic downturn happens, then all positions need to be looked at, to see where we need to cut back, et cetera, not just new positions that we're adding. But the reason that I am making this recommendation is because I'm absolutely confident that we can sustain these positions going forward. As development happens as well, our tax base increases, and so we have more property taxes to be able to support new positions. We talked about the pension obligation bond, and that's going to free up about $500,000 annually in our general fund to be able to support new positions. So we're in a good place. And I was having a conversation with our interim finance director earlier, and he agrees. We're in a good place financially, and credit to the previous staff who has helped get us there to where we can invest in our personnel infrastructure.
I couldn't agree with you
Yeah.
more. Investing in our human infrastructure, you can't ignore that, and we shouldn't. I would like to see a little more benchmarking in terms of what the other cities are paying the positions, and say the cities of like population and how many people they have in there. I just like to see a few more comparisons.
That's the purpose of that comprehensive compensation study.
Great.
Yep.
And just note that, you add all these positions, that you're going to have people who come to the city for MOUs that are 3 years. So you're not just hiring people for 1 year, you're hiring folks for 3 years. And that's going to definitely put impact on the city beyond the $2 million. And I hear what
Absolutely.
you're saying, that prospects are good. Selma has definitely been a commercial juggernaut. And, in the years I've been on the council, the commercial has really sustained the city, because we're close to the 99. And we've gotten a lot of sales tax on that and not as much on the property tax. So I hear what you're saying, the property tax will compensate and add to the city's general fund to pay for the additional personnel costs. But again, personnel costs, you talk about buildings going up and inflation, personnel costs do the same thing, along with benefits, and they always get very expensive. So that's a note of caution that I would have for that. And I look back over the last year and I see virtually no commercial development happening in Selma. And I see all this machinery going towards residential. You yourself said it. There's only one commercial development on there, Selma Grove, of projects in play right
And
now.
Selma Crossings as well.
Okay, 2, and the rest are residential. So, I mean, it's definitely, it's towards, I won't say biased, it's just, I would just say it's more, sloped towards residential development for the
Sure.
future of Selma. And to add all these personnel costs, the commercial has always sustained Selma in the past, the car dealerships and the retail sales tax. So just a word to the wise on that we should watch that and make sure that we have the money, because I think you're exactly right. The reason that, city's in this position is because the money has been saved, and a 20% of the general fund, a 20% number has been put in reserve. And that's really important to have that, in case of an economic downturn. But you're adding pressure to that, right, with the personnel. So, we just need to make sure that as the city spends all this money, that it's accounted for and that it can be made up. I think it's a really important part of it as well, to save that money so that we don't get into trouble down the line.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor. Any other questions? Okay. So moving on here, we have another aspect of our ARPA allocation recommendations. We did receive and our community services director provided an update at the last council meeting on Monday, an update on the per capita grant from State Parks Department, that we received $193,327 for improvements at our existing parks. And so we're going to be getting new playground equipment at Brettlinger. Peter Ringo Park is getting a new shade covering, and we are going to get new playground surfacing at Schaefer Park. Those are great improvements. In our perspective, they're not enough to really bring our park facilities up to snuff with what the community expects. And so for that reason, we would like to request $450,000 in additional funding from the ARPA allocation to continue these park improvements to supplement and leverage the per capita grant. Those improvements, what they are, we don't know yet. We would like to get input, and a lot of the input we received from the Rockwell Pond project is going to be very valuable as we determine what those improvements would be if council decides to approve this. So in total, we would have $633,000 to work with for improvements at our existing park facilities.
I have a question real quick, or not a question, just to add to this. I'd like for you guys to add in regards to the existing money, that's the request or the need for kids with special needs. You could add that to the existing parks right now and come up with some kind of numbers and some more lighting to all the parks, because if we have lighting, that'll kind of keep the homeless away more. That there, and maybe some, I think there's a park out where the baseball fields are at. seeing
Certainly.
about basketball or pickleball. So we
Yep.
could add those.
Pickleball at Bretlinger Park. I think that's very much in line with a lot of the feedback and existing projects that we've received over the past. Appreciate that, Councilman. But we will, whatever projects that we come up with, we will bring it back to council and get your continued input. So to wrap up, I think this is the second to last slide. Are we at an hour yet? I know, Mayor, you wanted to take a break at an hour. Did you want me to finish this and then?
A little past, but we're
Okay.
almost done, so just, let's keep rolling.
I apologize. I
Unless
lost
council would
track of
like to take a
time.
break.
I'm good.
Yeah,
Let's go,
okay.
let's go.
So just to summarize all the recommended actions that staff is asking council to take, number one, we'd like for the council to approve the standard allowance for the full ARPA allocation of $5,938,668, to approve the allocation of $3 million to upgrade Clarkson Avenue Lift Station, and direct staff to negotiate the development and reimbursement agreements with developers, to approve the allocation of $2 million for personnel costs related to salary schedule updates and the addition of new positions, to approve up to $138,668 for development impact fee study update, and/or infrastructure facilities master plans, which will include storm drain, sewer, water, circulation, parks, broadband, and streets, which I forgot to add there for our growth areas. To direct staff to move forward with development of a comprehensive infrastructure funding and financing plan and allocate up to $50,000 for a consultant for that plan. To direct staff to proceed with negotiations with the developer for the 10-acre park donation. To direct staff to proceed with negotiations for the purchase of the county property for future development of Rockwell Pond Park, but also as an addition to that, to temporarily suspend activity on the current Rockwell Park project, except for the negotiations with the county. And to approve $450,000 for existing park improvements and $300,000 for new park development for the 10-acre park. And finally, to direct staff to proceed with the iBank loan if pre-approved for $20 million in sewer infrastructure projects. And certainly that will come back to council when we formally submit that application. And so this would be a motion, an approval by motion with a roll call vote
For all items at once, or are we gonna go down the line?
for all items at once.
Okay, but what if, what if someone has an issue with one of them
Sure.
and wants the other one?
So I would
Attorney?
recommend at that point, council, that you take that one item and vote on it separately. But you do have I mean, if council wants to take each item individually and vote on them individually, you're welcome to.
A lot of items.
Yeah, if you want to approve them with one motion, that's an option as well. What we want to have is clear minutes. So when we start pulling items to modify them, that's why I make the recommendation for separate.
Look, a chance to
Yeah.
have input before.
My
the-
next slide
before we go to the vote.
includes input from developers.
Yeah, the public including the developers.
And so before, and I would ask council before you take a vote to also open it up for comment to the developers, any partner agencies, property owners, and of course, the general public.
Great. With that, we'll, thank you. Limit that to 3 minutes for everybody speaking, or what does council want to do?
Everybody, so you better keep track. So let's just.
Let's start with 3 minutes, and, we'll see if people are going over, then we'll afford them some more time, but let's start with the 3. Okay. Oh, you wanted to, does everybody, should we take a break? Should we take a quick 5-minute break before we allow input?
Let's take a 5-minute
Let's do
break.
that. We'll
Okay.
come back at 6:30.
We're gonna do nothing, but sure.
I was thirsty on this one.
Would you like?
I want to take an opportunity to thank all of the participants that we have on Zoom and calling in. At this point, I want to just let you know that council is taking a break, and we will be taking comments from everyone in the room. And then once we take comments from everyone in the room, we will then open up the opportunity to take comments from everyone that is calling in and online. At that point, we ask everyone to use the features that Zoom provides. So raise your virtual hand. And if you're calling in by phone, please use the *9 to raise your virtual hand. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. We are back in session and ready for input from developers. We'll start with the 3 minutes. If people need extra time, just let us know. Who would like to be first? Whether online or whether here tonight, if you'd like to step up, say something. Do we have anyone online who would like to comment? Oh, we've got somebody here tonight, like to say something. Come on up, sir.
Jim Avalos, 1701 Dinuba, Selma, California. Okay, I have a question. The gentleman still on the line, the guy that was on the park, the donation for the 10 acres,
Oh, Mr. Spade, are you still on the line?
still online? I guess he's not. Okay. All right. When you guys were talking about the Malaroos and all these other situations here, how to find money, you know, and I listened what this guy was saying, and there is in our city, I never forgot, we had a project, we couldn't do it because it was not safe in the area, and that was for seniors. That was off of Dinuba. And I'm proposing to this gentleman here, those 10 acres that he wishes to donate, if he's willing to donate to the senior housing project, where we can get state and federal money free. And we can get the trunk line built with the money. So, and it won't cost the taxpayers hardly nothing. So, and then we can continue on that project, the Rockwell down the road.
Are you saying on the east side,
Yep.
sir? Clarify, you're saying to the east side?
To the 10 acres.
10
that
acres
we-
on the east side?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so that way we can look at the whole picture, guys. Because, you know, we're talking about
Not talking
chunk
about
of
his
money,
land.
guys, as far as, and then we got other issues too. We really don't know
He's
how
talking
much money
about
we have in
Manus' property.
the kitty right now. And here we want to do a study on $2 million for the employees and do this. Before we do these things, I would suggest to the council to look at your finances before we move on to the situations here. Like, if a long time ago, we had crunch time. We had to lay off people. I know, I was a part of that, unfortunately, in that era, but we brought the people back. But during that process, we offered things to the people, but at the same time, we made these people multitask people who they are now, which are like the dream team. Everybody in this that works for the city, I don't care who it is, has become a dream team player. They have to because they're multitasked. And do I say we should pay them more? Yes, but before we could pay them more, I want to look at the financial structure before we can give them, because we got to look at the cost. Everything's going to go up, a downturn or something like this, because I've seen it already in the past. What happened? I don't want you guys to make that same mistake that happened in the past. We didn't have more foresight, but now what happened, we learned from that. So I learned from that. So I'm giving you verbal warning to the council up here to look at these whole picture, not just, one single item. Look at the whole thing. But thank you
Thanks for your
allowing me to
comments, Mr. Avalos. Anyone else like to make a comment at this time? I thought we were just doing developers, but we had Mr. Avalos stand up, so come on up. Developers are part of the general public, so go ahead.
Louis Franco, 1064 Mill Street. I just want to commend our city manager here. I think council should be very pleased with the choice they made to bring him. I think he bringing a plan that addresses a lot of needs that the city hasn't been able to address in quite a while. I think it's a step forward in the right directions. I see that, it'd be nice if there was a perfect plan without some risk, but sometimes we need to really invest in our community and take the chances to move our community forward. So I hope that council would approve his recommendations. And once again, I just want to commend him for his foresight in addressing the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment at this time? Come on up, sir.
Good evening. My name is Baldev Josan, and I hear a lot of good things today. And I tell you, from my experience, hired as a city manager for 31 years in my profession, is really moving ahead under the administrative lead. Has done a lot of work, good work, but there is a lot more to do. But it will come once you collectively forward the plan he's recommending. It's very good, but there are a lot more other things to on the way to be done. I'm sure he will foresee those. Even on the financial mechanism, has brought in some today, but there are still a lot more untapped areas. I think developers, property owners, elected officials, when we all group together, pull our resources, we'll come up with something unique for the future of this community. And I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. So the reason we admitted the general public is when we call for developers, no one stood up, right? So now we're doing general public and developers. If anyone would like to weigh in at this time, please come forward, or we have anybody online? Oh, we have someone else.
Teresa Salas, 1701 Dinuba Avenue. Listening to everything that was presented, I am in full agreement and support of the recommendations made by your city manager. He sounds very informed of the information he provided, and we have to start somewhere. And I think there are good places to start. We're not saying give everybody a raise, but a good salary survey with human resources, more personnel to be able to deal with the growth that we anticipate coming. The new park, there's just a lot of really good growth and potential for growth and improvement in our community that we haven't seen for years. And I really do support that. And I agree with Mr. Franco that you guys made a wonderful choice in our city manager.
We have anyone online? Anyone on? Okay, another comment?
As a reminder to the callers that we have on, as a reminder to the callers that we have online, get ready to, if you would like to begin to do the raise your hand feature after we take the next comment here in City Hall.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Rodriguez. I've lived at 1313 Sarah Street for a long time, just recently moved to close to the inner city. I'm on the Parks and Recreation Commission, or Parks and anyways, recreation's a big one in there. So the park deal that's coming up right now, looking at it, honestly, I know the first details I've gotten on it. And to be honest, where it makes sense coming from, money, or sort of the money standpoint. But what I really wanted to point out is that, so where I live, it's literally the extremity, where I lived and grew up was the extremity of the town, on Dockery and Dinuba. And if you put so there's a tool that we use online in determining where to put the next park in Rockwell Pond. And, I don't know, something about impacted area was where I live. And whereas it's not the most, it's not area that we have, which definitely needs to be impacted, the low-income areas for sure. I also didn't realize growing up as a kid how far parks were from me, how far I had to travel, how far I had to get on my bike and go across the town just to be at Abraham Lincoln Middle School, which wasn't even a park. Still had to go down Orange to get to a park. That became a normal thing for me. And, as days get, shorter and, times get crazier, that's not possible for a child at my age. When I was 10 or 12 years old, riding my bike across town was normal. Now a 10 or 12-year-old, I'm not sure if I'd let, my daughter do that if she was 10 or so I mean, if this part goes through, and I understand, it's great, and I'm not going to say no to a new park. That's been my goal since I've moved to Selma, and my goal since I was a kid, or since a kid, seeing troubled youth, and being one myself. Never going to say no to a park in a new area, but I would want to see, coming from a commissioner, person who sees parks in that area where it's going to be impacting the most people that are furthest from a park, and to account as well. That doesn't quite make sense to me. Aqua Pond doesn't quite either, but it was also a better move in my head. I'd like to see the financials.
Thank you. Anyone online, City Clerk, with their hand raised?
We'll give them another opportunity to raise your hand. As a reminder to use your raise your hand feature on the Zoom app. And also for those few callers that we have calling in, please use *9 and we will select you from the meeting queue. Mayor Robertson, I see no hands raised at this time.
Thank you, City Clerk. With that, we'll bring it back to council. Are there any final comments the council would like to make before we adjourn tonight? Any council members?
We didn't get any developers online to hear from them.
I saw some online. I don't know. I know a few were on earlier as panelists. I don't know if they signed off or, yeah.
Right.
And I would remind the council that we still need to take a vote, that the council still needs to take a vote on the issue, the items.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, congratulations. This is well thought out, well worked, and I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing in not only recommendations, but you're bringing stats that follow with, that justify what we need to do. On my own observation, I understand. I live on Dinuba. I live on Orange and Dinuba and Orange, and I understand the need of a park. 2 years ago or 3 years ago when I ran, people asked me, when are we going to get a park? But I understood there was a vision on Dockery, and I entertained the vision in Dockery. But as a council member, we need to see what's the price and what's the cost. And I found that it was not feasible for our community, long-term wise, looking at a financial plan. And I understood that looking at a park 10 years ago and being where we're at right now is more importantly why we need a salary master plan. More importantly, why we need to understand what our staff needs to know and how much they need to get paid. Because just like me owning a business, I know that if I pay staff well, we're going to get good quality workers. And I'm not saying there's no quality workers. Everybody's a quality worker, but I'm just saying that we need to set the tone here. At the same time that we're investing in our developers and our community, we need to invest on our employees. Rate of return. Every employee we invest in, we'll get a rate of return. We'll get something in return. Monday's meeting, somebody told me, or someone said that, helping to pay a sewer infrastructure to developers is kind of like a handout. I don't consider that. I consider that a joint powers agreement or an agreement with a developer, hand in hand, is value to the community. It brings residents. It brings people to my restaurant. I own a restaurant, she owns a restaurant. It brings self-insurance. There's a lot that comes with doing agreements with developers. And this community hasn't had that vision for 12 years. But we need to move forward. And when I vote my way, it's because I want giving you guys reasons of why I'm doing this. Because it's really valuable, because as a resident that's watching this right now, come and ask me why I voted this way. Come and ask me why I voted. But I'll be able to tell you that I had a city manager that gave me firm decisions and gave me information that backed up what he needed to do. It's very important that we consider what they've brought to us. It's a value. It's very important. But the most important thing out of this is that we need to understand that the salary master plan schedule is very important to be added to this. And to the community of Selma, I tell you that today's a really big day. It's very important because what it's saying is that the City of Selma council members are ready to work with developers to move the city ahead. So with that, I tell you guys that that's my comment. Other than that, thank you.
Thank you. Next comment. City council member like to make a comment?
So, my comment is, this was a very, there's no words. I really appreciate all the time and the work that you put into this. This was a really good presentation with a lot of information, a lot of valuable information. And this is exactly my vision, like I mentioned before, that I saw when I, first said I wanted to run. I saw there was a bottleneck. I didn't know where it was. I saw there was no infrastructure. I saw there was no growth. No, the housing, we were lacking in housing. In the industry that I work in, I saw other communities being developed, and I said, why not my community? And the only thing that I could think of is I need to go in there and see. So I took a chance. I just said, okay, I'm going to do this. And this is exactly what I envision happening for our city. And I'm really excited about the growth that we're going to do. And yeah, change is scary. We don't have that vision. We don't have that crystal ball. We don't have that what's going to happen in the future, but we know what we've done in the past, and we don't want to make those same mistakes. And we just have to take chances. We know that the housing is needed. We could see it in the numbers. We're lacking in the RENA numbers. Those RENA numbers we need to hit so that we can have more schools, so that we can have more students, so we can have more ADA, so we can have more, so we can build those parks, so we can have all of that. We need to move forward, and we cannot look backwards. We have to, it is very important to do a salary study. As somebody that's worked in a public agency for over 20 years, yeah, sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm just working and working and working, and there's no potential. Well, my agency's gone through a couple of studies a couple of times, and I'm going to tell you, it's been very beneficial, and the opportunities for growth have been there. And so me being, a immigrant, being able to move up, in my community, or, with my community, I would love to see that here too. Be able to make a difference in my community, having our staff make a difference in our community, I think is really important. And so I support everything, all of the work that you did here, the developers, the staff, everybody. So I just want to commend you for this presentation, this very well put together presentation. And again, too, at the end of the day, if somebody asks me why I voted a certain way, I have a vision. I had a goal. I have a goal of what I want to see our city look like. And so I'm not going to jeopardize what I see. I'm not going to let anybody cloud my vision and what I see for the city. So thank you.
I'd like to make a comment as well. First of all, I would love to commend our new city manager, Fernando, for this detailed report. And along with your report, it brings facts. You brought facts to us. The other thing is, being born and raised in Selma, it hasn't been the last 12 years. It's been longer than that. Let's say it's been 20, 25 years. I've sat with developers and they agreed. I've been to meetings, I've been to council meetings, I've attended school board meetings. And let me tell you, back then we should have had development going on way back then. We had projects in the works and it never got done. And there was always reasons for this, that, and the other, or whatever, but this is a new council. And I'm telling you, we do need to look forward. We need to make some changes and move this city forward. Yes, this is a lot of money that we're looking at. However, we have to look at, I seen with the recession, I saw when they had to fire people or let people go. You know, I saw that. I mean, we were here. And, you know, people have to go back to home to their families and say, hey, I just got laid off. I mean, that's an ugly thing, you know? People were really scared. How are they going to feed their kids? How are they going to make mortgage payments? But again, you know, that's why I sit up here, because I got to look at the whole picture. And I'll tell you, I don't want to see that happen. You know, I really don't want to see people get laid off. And I would have liked to probably seen a little more detailed in the salary structure to say, this is how much we're going to do for this. We talked about giving a one-time bonus to PD, you know, so we can attract staff, because we're right now hurting with our PD staff. Same thing, you know, with our first responders, our fire. We talked about their staff. You know, we're looking at a lot of challenges, and I think overall this was great report, but I wanted to hear some concrete, like we said, skins, you know, we want to hear from the developers. This is what we're willing to do. If Selma's willing to do this, you know, we're ready to go. I want to make sure that we have signed contracts, agreements, so that we don't get hit like we did 7 years ago with the developer that had to file bankruptcy and leave. You know, that's not a good sight for Selma. I'm going to say that everything else looks great. But again, you know, those are just my comments and my concerns, and I want to move forward. So.
Pro Tem?
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Fernando, also for this great project presentation. I'm Lisa, new on the council, and I've been here quite a few years, and you're right, the growth hasn't been here. You know, all the cities around has been growing. And my question was, how come Selma wasn't growing? You know, I didn't get it, you know, because we're right here, perfect, you know, from Fresno. And, you know, nobody wants to live in Fresno. They might as well live in a little nicer town, smaller town, and just get to work. So to me, with this project, the way it's looking, there's a light. I mean, we're moving forward, and I am really, really excited to be part of it. Thank you.
Dittos all around. Did a great job with the presentation, Mr. City Manager. Doing a great job. I'm really inspired by your vision. I'm excited by it. But I also have to look at the big picture as well, as a representative of the people and what the people are going to be saying. And as the other council members have said, how am I going to explain my vote? And, you know, what I would like to see to round this out, well, let me back up. I see this as a very good first draft, but I don't see anything about our capital improvement plan that had a community center. I don't see anything about our fire station that we're going to need. I don't see anything about PD and public safety. I see almost nothing about public safety. Actually, the body cam issue for PD, the items that the public safety and the first responder folks need, and I know they'll be included in the personnel study and the salary budget, but it's more than that too, because we're talking about the infrastructure here. And I don't think that I would have ran for office if the people wouldn't have come and told me, and me being right there, about how important public safety is to our city. This is what we do up here. We have to ensure public safety. This is a great start. It also puts almost all the eggs in the basket of sewer infrastructure. I mean, that's all it's really going towards. I mean, that is the major thrust here. There's a little bit for broadband, but most of it goes into the sewer infrastructure for the capital infrastructure. In terms of the personnel, again, you haven't sold me on why we need to put $2 million of this American Rescue Plan money that I've never seen before. I mean, this is money that is amazing. 5.9 million, and we get to take the standard deduction and use it for government services. So that is really, really helpful. I've never seen that before. Really a great opportunity here. So I don't want us to squander it, right? Because this is not going to happen forever. And I can, just remember in the past, like we talked about with the bad times that this council hasn't seen of 2007. They've seen it as people in the community, but we haven't seen it on the council itself and what happens then, what you have to do and the tough decisions you have to make. And adding a whole bunch of jobs and a bunch of bureaucracy can be a real problem if and when that does happen. Just keeping that in mind. We've also had a lot of developers that have said good things about wanting to come to Selma and then never really quite following through and signing on that dotted line. And I really did think we would have more input from the developer community tonight saying, I'm signing on. We heard from a few who said, it sounds really good, like what you're doing, but I don't know who's actually signed on the dotted line yet. I know the sewer infrastructure needs to happen. We need to keep moving forward with that to give it that catalytic push. But we're also looking at an iBank loan that the city is going to have to pay over 20, 25, 30 years for more sewer, right? And that's 20 million additional dollars for more sewer. That's in addition to the 3 million sewer avenue lift station and upgrade here. That is just a lot for one particular area. And I would just encourage our city administration to keep other areas in mind too that need funding as well. Great creative outside the box thinking on the park. 10 acres, getting that 10 acres, that is, and staff did that. You thought of that. That is a great idea to get to start, but that is an intermediate step. We need more than 10 acres. We need to keep going. And so, I don't want to, our long-suffering director of Parks and Community Services feel, and along with all the people that have come out and supported this park over the years, that this is it. Suspending the operations on Rockwell Pond doesn't mean it's over. It just means we have to take that intermediate step, but something is coming. And that's a good thing. And that's a compromise well worth making. And it's a compromise we're lucky to make. 5.9 million coming, 4.4 million. This just doesn't happen very often. So it really is a golden opportunity. And I just want to encourage this money to be spent in the right way that pays off for the future in the best way. So with that, I guess we're ready for the vote. We said, so Mary, City Attorney Lerner, we can vote on this all at once, but what if somebody has one counselor, two counselor, or three council members have items they don't want to vote for?
So then my recommendation would be to note those items now and pull them out separately. And then if there's a package that you can vote on at the end with the remaining items, that's fine as well. And then we have a clear record for the minutes for Raina.
Okay. I would take off item the 2 million for the personnel costs related to salary schedule. I'd like to vote on that separately. Does anyone else have any items they would like to take off and vote on separately?
I have a question. What if I want to vote for all of them?
So when you get to that separate item and you're taking a vote on that separate item, you would just vote yes on that at that point in time. So you
you're
still
pulling-
aren't
so
losing the
you're gonna-
ability to vote yes.
So you're going to pull out the one that he's asked, or the one that mayor's asking. I apologize for that. And then we'll vote on everything else.
Right. You could still make a motion to
Anybody
approve
can
that
take
item
any items off they
separately.
want, Not
Mhm.
just the mayor.
No,
Anybody can,
I'm not
council
saying
members
that.
can take
I'm not
any
saying
item
that.
off.
I'm asking what the structure, how we're going to vote this.
Right. So it's really up to council. So let's say items A, B, C, and D are pulled. So someone could make a motion to approve E, F, G, H, and I,
Like
and then
consent.
you could have a separate motion for A, or a separate motion for B, or a separate motion for C or D, or not have any motions for those.
Understood.
So
Okay.
I make a motion to approve A through I with the exception of C.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please.
We're removing C, right?
We're removing C,
Okay.
but did anyone else,
Separate.
did anyone have any other items they wanted to remove?
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho,
Yes.
Councilmember Guerra,
Yes.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Yes.
Mayor Robertson.
Yes. Okay, item C, approving the allocation of the 2 million for personnel costs.
I make a motion to
Us.
approve it.
I'll second it.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro,
Yes.
Councilmember Trujillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Guerra,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho,
Yes.
Mayor Robertson.
No. All right. With that we have our vote. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Appreciate all the input. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
We're adjourned.